So I had already been working in cannabis tech since 2019, so right at the very really beginning of full legalization in Canada. I had been reading and learning more about the anxiety-reducing benefits of cannabis, but when I went to my doctor looking for additional guidance on it, I just was not able to get the support.
Now, let's talk a bit about the stigma behind it, or why people are actually not talking about it.
I think that full legalization in Canada has helped.
Hi there, and welcome back to the Beyond Product Podcast. My name is Moshe Mikanovsky, and I'm your host. On the show today, we're going to explore the use of technology in a health space that many people still find hard to talk about. And that's exactly the problem our guest is trying to solve. It is my pleasure to welcome to the show Karina Bernin, co-founder and CEO of Elon Med. Elon Med helps people live healthier, happier lives by teaching them about the power of medical cannabis. The platform guides consumers and clinicians through their entire medical cannabis journey, from education to helping them pick the best products for their needs. Elon Med is demystifying plant medicine and helping people find natural solutions to their health. Karina herself is a medical cannabis patient and has felt the struggles of the patient experience firsthand, which was a driver for creating Elon Med. Another reason I'm excited to have Karina with us today is because her background is in product management and UX design, specializing in innovation for cannabis tech startups. Welcome to the show, Karina.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, really great having you here with us. And I had to practice how to say cannabis before the show. For some reason, I don't know why, maybe by background, maybe by accent, I would tell people cannabis, and they were like, "What are you talking about?"
It's up to interpretation, right?
I know. So it's actually easier to say it for Canadians because it's like Canada, so it's cannabis, right?
Exactly. It's that syllable at the beginning.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But pronunciation aside, I think we all know what we're talking about here. And first of all, I just want to introduce yourself. Tell us a bit about how did you get to this, to be a founder, co-founder of a startup, and specifically in this area.
Yeah. So I had already been working in cannabis tech since 2019. So right at the very really beginning of full legalization in Canada. I had started as a UX designer and then I moved into product management and then started my own company. But more on a personal note, I have been struggling with a generalized anxiety disorder for pretty much my whole
Mm.
life. And it got to the point where I was having, constant panic attacks. Any little thing I'd just very easily be triggered or overwhelmed by things. And it really got to the point where it was debilitating and it really started to even impede on my work. So I knew that I had to find a way to manage my mental health in a better way. And I really wanted to find a natural way to do that because just my own personal preference, I just didn't want to go down the route of prescription medications because I knew that there could be a lot of different side effects that I just didn't want to have to deal with. So I had been reading and learning more about the anxiety reducing benefits of cannabis. But when I went to my doctor looking for additional guidance on it, I just was not able to get the support that I was looking
Mm.
for. So because of that, I was kind of forced to self-medicate and just navigate this overwhelming world of cannabis on my own. I really, at the beginning, didn't know which types of products could be the most beneficial for my
Mhm.
needs. Um, Trying to find this information was also very convoluted and complicated. There's so much online and it's hard to know, what's real, what's not, what's going to be most useful for me as well,
Mm.
right? Because everyone's
Right.
different. Um, but, after a lot of trial and error, I was finally able to find what works for me. And it's been a complete game changer for me and managing my anxiety. And that is why I'm also very passionate about the work that we're doing at Elon Med, because we just want to make sure that nobody has to go through this journey alone and can find the support they're looking
Yeah.
for if they need.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
searching the other day for, well, what is it that I can find out there without using Alien Med? And
Yeah.
Everything I found was those long articles that were really boring to read. Many of them were
Sure.
government articles, so from Canada government or from other governments, but none of them were very specific to asking me what is it that you're actually looking for.
Yeah.
I shared with you earlier, I have migraine headaches. And I thought, okay,
Mhm.
maybe it can help with migraine headaches. So I was searching for that. I even used ChatGPT to tell me what do I need to do, to which cannabis products could I use to help me with
Mhm.
my migraines. And it was so, I don't know, it was really just generic information that didn't really help me. So I can
Yeah.
really see how someone that is looking for that information can really find themselves drowning in all the information out there that doesn't really help you.
Yeah, exactly. It's information overload, some of it as
Yeah,
well. And you don't, it's hard to find what's relevant to you
yeah.
as
So
well.
tell
Yeah.
us a bit about Elon Med. How do you solve it with the technology that you build?
Yeah, so our platform is designed for consumers and clinicians, and it helps them learn about medical cannabis as well as guiding them through their entire medical cannabis journey. So we have education modules and education built in throughout the platform. We also have a research backed algorithm that we created in the back end. So we have a product directory. You can go in and filter the list for your specific symptoms or other various preferences we have in there. You can get super granular or you can keep really high level. And then the system will give you suggestions on products based on your specific needs. And that gives people just like a starting point to go from. And then we also have integrated with a virtual clinic that we work with. So if somebody's looking for that additional support, they can speak to a knowledgeable clinician and get that full guidance and hand holding. And then we also show them where they can actually go and then purchase their products when they're ready. So we're kind of a hub of information. So you one centralized place instead of having to go to a million different websites.
So it's like a one-stop shop for everyone from the time that they start educating themselves about it because they have some need to actually finding a solution for that.
Exactly. And even people who have already been using cannabis for a long time, maybe they've already tried a couple products and whether they had success or not with it, maybe they want to try to find something new. This can be a great resource to keep coming back to say, okay, that product wasn't quite right for me. What else can I try? What else could be a good option for me? So, yeah.
Now, let's talk a bit about the stigma behind it or why people are actually not talking about it. Did you find through your research that this is still an issue?
Yes, there's definitely still a stigma around cannabis, especially used as a medicine. I think that full legalization in Canada has helped. It's more, there's a shop on every corner, right, on the recreational side. Um, but for a lot of people, it's still difficult for them to see it as a real option as a medicine, except for the people who have tried it and have had success with it. Like the people in the cannabis industry, especially, are so passionate about it because so many of them have had such a like profound personal experience with it and how it's helped them. But yeah, we started our research back in the day with user interviews because we wanted to understand. I had my experience as a cannabis patient, but what were other people experiencing? So we started by speaking to other patients. And one of the main things that we kept hearing was that a lot of people had experienced a very similar thing that I had, where they wanted that guidance from their healthcare practitioner, but they weren't able to get it. And so, because of that, they're kind of left to figure it out on their own, which can be very overwhelming. You don't have to self medicate with any other medication, right? So, and a lot of people also had concerns if they were on other medication. They didn't know maybe cannabis could interact with those medications. So, there's also some risk factors that they were trying to navigate. Um, yeah, and so that was the main issue we found with patients was wanting the guidance, and then we started speaking to clinicians because we wanted to understand well what was the blocker for some people like why can't we have conversations about cannabis, and for the clinicians that we spoke to, we were pleasantly surprised to find that many of them were actually curious about cannabis, and it's not necessarily that they're like oh no cannabis, but many of them felt not comfortable talking about cannabis with their patients because they didn't feel like they had enough information about it to really be able to give advice on it. And they didn't know where they could go to find trusted information on it. And on top of that, healthcare workers are so busy. They don't have a ton of time to be spending hours researching out of office hours to try to figure it out. So there were those pain points we identified there. And then the third, part of this triangle is the licensed cannabis producers. So those, my co-founder and I, we were working with them in our previous roles for many years, and we know that with many licensed producers, they are struggling to get their products in front of new patients and clinicians because there are very strict marketing regulations and just regulations overall in the cannabis industry. Yeah, so they're putting so much time and care into creating these amazing products. How do they actually get it to the people that need it the most, right? So those are the three main problems that we identified, and that's where we started coming up with our solution of the Elon Med.
What about the health system behind the clinicians? I mean, is this still considered an alternative medicine, and therefore they don't want to support it so much as they support the traditional medicine?
Well, I think that the problem is that, from what we've been hearing from people, from clinicians we've spoken to, I'm not a medical professional, so I can't speak from my personal experience. However, we are in close contact with many. So this isn't widely taught in medical school. Like, we're not taught about our endocannabinoid systems and how it works and how cannabis can play a factor into that. And not just cannabis, but even other things that we can be doing in our day-to-day lives that can help support our endocannabinoid system in our bodies, which keeps our bodies in balance. And when it's out of balance is when we start getting things like disease. So I think the biggest problem is like the lack of education and having that systemically in like educational institutions as well. So there's still catching up to that. But there is more and more research coming out. It's just getting that information out there.
So it seems like a gap there in the entire ecosystem that you are filling in through the technology that you build to bring everyone together, create that one-stop shop, and a bit of a marketplace as well for all the manufacturers that you mentioned. It's hard for them to actually get out to their clients. So that's really interesting.
At the end of the day, also, we're not saying, like, everybody is going to use cannabis and it's going to change their lives. It's just that we want to have the ability to give people access to that information if they want it. Everyone should have a choice, right? So
But I love how you describe the different type of people that you talk with and what you find out through that. So this emphasize the need for all of those research and discovery in the initial stages. So it seems it sounds like you've done a lot of that when you started.
yes, exactly. We didn't start even designing anything or creating any sort of ideas for solutions until we did that initial research. And that's just, coming from a UX background, that's kind of how my brain is wired anyway. So
So let's talk a bit more about that. What type of tests that you tried? How did you make those discoveries other than talking with people?
yeah, so once we had those initial user interviews, that's when I went back and we started thinking, okay, what could we bring to the table? And so then I created some mock-ups and put together a clickable design prototype. So then we started conducting live user testing. So we would recruit people. Primarily at the time, we were just launching the platform for healthcare practitioners. We hadn't opened it up to consumers yet. We had originally thought that this would be a platform for healthcare practitioners to use in the appointment with their patients. So we started recruiting people to talk to and do these live tests with. So to get people to talk to us, it was a lot of cold outreach just through our social networks, through our personal networks as well. Like, I remember putting up a post on my Facebook just saying, hey, who's using cannabis as medicine right now? Or who is it, a healthcare practitioner who I can talk to? And just messaging friends and saying, who do you know who works in the healthcare field? Then we took them through a live call and had them kind of walk through the platform and see if they could complete the tasks we set out for them. The nice thing about those live user testing sessions, too, was that we could dive deeper into certain things and ask follow-up questions. Um, but then, we had some of those and we got some really great feedback that we could iterate on. But then we wanted to also hear, what would people say or think if we weren't in the conversation? Because sometimes, you have a live session with someone, maybe they like you, they think you're nice, they don't want to hurt your feelings, they don't want to say something mean to you, and they say, oh, great, it's amazing. But then you're not necessarily getting the full picture and the full opinion. So we also wanted to get an anonymous, unbiased view of the platform. So what we did second was we just spun up a web page on our website where we had a video recording of us walking through the clickable prototype. And then below the video, we just had a few survey questions that people could answer anonymously. And then we got that feedback that way as well. We could compare the two and go from there and start iterating.
What did you find out? Was it very different from those that might have been biased because you were there?
Um, for the most part, we got very similar answers, which was good because that means that we were onto something. But there were some that were like, maybe to our faces, they wouldn't have said what they said because we also had like a little section where you could put your own like text. We had a couple that were like, maybe they weren't as on board with just even the concept of cannabis so much. But it's also good to hear negative feedback as well because then you can see what are the concerns that people have, and then you can think about how you can address those with your product.
So your background as a UX designer and as a product manager, I'm sure, helped you to come up with these types of testing and processes. That was probably a benefit to have such background.
Definitely, yeah, yeah. The benefit of having the understanding of how to run those types of tests and maybe the step by step process that you can take. Also, even just coming from product management, like even just internally, it was very helpful because I was already used to managing teams, working with different stakeholders, planning roadmaps and prioritization, and wearing a million hats. So yeah, it was definitely a beneficial to starting something else from scratch. I also come from startup world, which is very scrappy, right? So
It's also very refreshing for me to see a founder that is coming from product management and design. Most of the founders I meet are either coming from the business or they're coming from the technology. So some of them come from product. It's actually quite natural to become either a CEO or to become a founder because you really understand as a in product all the entire business and you have that empathy to the users. So the combination here of having a personal problem plus the background of product management seems to be like a winning combination.
I hope so. Yeah, it's good. It feels right.
Yeah. On the flip side of things, what things that you didn't have in your background you felt were big gaps, so you have to learn really quickly as a founder that you kind of struggled with or had to overcome.
Yeah. So some of the things that I mean, again, coming from a startup background, I was used to learning new things quickly, maybe things that I wasn't necessarily comfortable with at the beginning. So I was used to that, but things that I did not come in with were things like understanding how to manage finances and legal things, and even we are a lean and mean team. We don't have a huge team to delegate tasks to. So we even had to learn how to be our own social media marketing managers and learning the algorithms and things like that. I'm not a social media person in my personal life. So it was like a learning curve as well. Um, so those are things that I've had to kind of learn as we go. And I'm still like learning and improving my skill set in all these areas.
But talking about social media, you're actually doing a great job over there. If everyone, after you watch this episode or listen to this episode, go and check out the social presence of Karina and also of her team at Elon Med. And you're doing a lot of social media shorts and videos. I love the 5 in 5 podcast that you have on YouTube, 5 questions in 5 minutes to experts in the industry in different topics. So, first of all, you got a thumbs up for me, 2 thumbs up for me on your social media. But tell us a bit about that because this is really a huge tool for you to get your message out there and to connect with your potential clients.
Yeah, I think that like I think it is very helpful if a founder can kind of put themselves out there if they feel comfortable to really connect with your audience. Our whole goal is to destigmatize medical cannabis, and people who are seeking medical cannabis to help with their either medical conditions or just overall wellness, they might already be feeling kind of insecure or in a vulnerable place. we want to make it feel like a very safe space, and like they can get some advice from a best friend, so make it less scary. And I always talk about, from my own experiences as well. Anytime I talk about different products or different things, it's always coming from my own personal experience, so that it can also help break that stigma to say, like, it's okay, you can also talk about this, you don't have to keep it a secret, and we can all learn together. So I think it helps with building a connection with our audiences, and it's just more fun and engaging, I think, to be able to see people just, putting themselves out there, and it gives a more human touch to your business as well.
And it feels to me that this type of marketing and relationship with your users is in that place. People probably that are more inclined to look into this and to use technology, and to not worry about the stigma, will also be using social media for their personal brands or for connecting with their friends or whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's a very powerful tool, and it's, especially if you're at the beginning stages or you're bootstrapped, like, it's free. So like, it's free advertising. Just put the work in, and you can build a big brand with that. So
Founders out there, right there, use the things that are free, and you just have to put the time for it and learn how to use that. What about liability, though? Isn't there some type of liabilities when you're telling people this is a great product, and you kind of maybe because of you they will use it, and maybe it's not going to work for them?
totally, yeah. So with our platform, and even with what we do on our social media, like, we're very mindful of not making any sort of definitive claims or statements, for regulatory purposes, but also just in reality, like, all of our bodies process cannabis differently. So what works for me, you might have a completely different experience with that same product, just based on how our bodies process it. So what we're doing is we're trying to give people a starting point that then they can kind of do their own trial and error from that starting point, rather than just starting from absolutely zero, no idea where to start. So everything we say, we're very careful about our wording of things. We're never saying, this product 100% will help your anxiety or will help you fall asleep. Like, it's always, we use terminology like, it may do this, or it, some studies have shown that X amount of people have reported this effect using this type of. So the wording we're very careful of, and also in when I talk about products in our social media posts, I try a lot of the products myself, and I always try to talk about it from my own personal experience and what I experienced, so people can have an idea of, what somebody experienced when they tried it. But also on top of that, if you are purchasing cannabis from the medical market, you have to get an authorization from a healthcare practitioner, so a nurse practitioner or a physician. So if somebody comes onto Elon Med and maybe they find a couple products that they're interested in trying, they still have to go through that integrated clinic, or maybe their own family doctor, to get the authorization and additional guidance to then be able to purchase those products. So we kind of mitigate our liability that way as well, because at the end of the day, we're just making starting point suggestions, but they still have to go through the medical route to get medical
So it's more
advice.
of
Yeah.
educated clients or patients that taking control over their decisions, but they still have to get that approval from their physicians, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is
Yeah.
this only in Canada, or do you also support it for other locations?
So right now we're only launched in Canada, but this is a global issue. And especially as more and more countries all over the world are starting to legalize cannabis, both medically and recreationally. So we definitely have plans to expand into other countries. So
I see.
indeed.
Yeah, and what I've seen in the platform, it's actually pretty easy. You have the forms over there, right there, and you can just go and print them, or get your doctor to look at that and then approve it. So it's very straightforward.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, we know that the process right now is quite convoluted, just the way that it's set up, like, at a government level. We have no control over that. But we're trying to make it so it's as easy as possible, so people don't get overwhelmed and lost. Everything you need is all in one place, and we can guide you through the whole process. So, yeah.
So we talked before about your founder journey and how you came from the background of UX design and product management, as well as coming from startups. So that helped you with the research, with discovery, with going, in a certain pace. What tips would you give other people that are not coming from this background, that they are, business founders or technical founders, and they really should learn from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, there's a ton of resources online. If they do like a little bit of research, that would be probably beneficial just to understand like the basic principles of design thinking and UX principles, because it's applicable to not just digital products, but any type of product or business, right? But I think that the main thing is what's super important is to make sure that you deeply understand the problem space before you start coming up with ideas for the solution. So, getting user feedback as early as possible can really help mitigate the risk of potentially spending a lot of time and a lot of money on building something that is not the right solution, right? Like is not actually solving the problem. Because at the end of the day, the most successful businesses and products are solving problems for people. So getting that feedback loop started as early as possible would be a really good place to start from.
Yeah, yeah, and I think some founders they do have it as they know it in their guts that they need to do it, or they have it as a natural thing to do that, or they've seen it done before, so that's why they do that. But many don't do it, and it's not natural for them. So that's why those tips are really important.
Yeah, I think it's also important because what we have as assumptions, like you have to be willing to have all of your assumptions debunked, right? Like go in thinking, okay, this is the solution, this is going to answer the problems, or what someone is going to say when you ask them a question in your interviews, for example. But then they give you something totally different, and then you have to be open to receiving the information so that you can get creative with coming up with solutions for it. So yeah, you think you know, and then you don't. You find out you don't when you actually get into the interviews. So,
Exactly. Great. Where do you see yourself and Elon Med in 5 years, in 10 years? What's the big vision?
yeah, I mean, I would love to see Elon Med in every legalized cannabis country across the world, helping people be able to get the support that they need with medical cannabis, especially because, as we've seen in Canada, once the recreational market legalized, which I'm not mad about, I think it's great, but the medical side of it did kind of get pushed to the wayside a little bit, and patients kind of got left in the dust a little bit because the support for the medical route was not necessarily there still. So I think that having a platform like this, as other countries start legalizing recreational as well, will be helpful to make that distinction between people who are looking just for a fun night versus like a day-to-day medicine that they can use.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting or important distinction to make, because I also had the same thought when I started looking into that. That once it's been legalized for recreational purposes, people would just use that and forget about the medical ones. Before the recreational was legalized, people would get the medical one because they wanted the recreational. But you're saying it's actually two very separate things.
I mean, listen, like where you access your cannabis from, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But the point is that, we have people who are looking for medical guidance that don't know where to go to get that guidance. They go to the shop down the street and they talk to the bud tender and say, start asking them for medical advice. The bud tenders, as knowledgeable as many of them can be, like they're not medical professionals. They're not authorized to give that type of advice. And like they're not really allowed to either. So they're also put in an uncomfortable position. So, in order to get the real guidance that you need, it has to be treated like a real medicine. So,
And that's also one of the reasons for legalization is to make things more organized and to make them more accessible for people. Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. It's still an early, like a young industry though, right? So we're still figuring things out. There's still a lot of work to be
I
done.
am sure about that. um, how do you get to the producers of the medical specific? Because there are many different I've seen many different products for many different illnesses that people are looking for. I was just looking for migraine headache and I found a few, but there is for many different types of illnesses. So, is there like a place where all of these people are, or is it also more of a, a lot of research and a lot of reaching out?
Yeah, we do a lot of outreach. We also, as we've been growing and we've been also growing our social media presence, we do have a lot of people coming to us now as well, saying, "Hey, like, what are you guys doing? How can we get involved?" But yeah, having been working in the cannabis industry for the last, I guess, 5 years, however, math, 2019 started. Um, we already had a quite a good network, and so it's just networking with the people in our existing networks to meet new people and have those conversations. But yeah, ultimately, like, we can be that bridge for many of these licensed producers to reach those new patients and clinicians. So
So part of the vision, I'm sure that it will be the go place for them to go to. So they will just tell everyone you need to be at Elon Med to, so everyone will know about your product. Mhm. That's the goal. Amazing. Amazing. So it's really great that technology does help you create that these days. And as we said, it's not just about putting it in front of people and creating a one-stop shop and creating a marketplace, but it's also the usage of technology around it in the ecosystem to promote it and market it and create a, it's really, you're creating also a community of people around that topic.
yeah, exactly. And as we grow the platform, we have a huge, robust roadmap of other features that we want to add to it that can help foster that community even more. So stay tuned for that when that comes down the road. But yeah, I think that, like, there's a lot there is more and more research coming out and medical publications and medical journals. But there is so much that we can learn as well from anecdotal use cases of, people want to know, okay, if I'm dealing with anxiety, what is somebody else who's been dealing with anxiety been using? How is it, what have they found that's worked for them? And then they can have that as a way to reference where they can also start from as well. Yeah.
If we already mentioned a few tips for other founders, but is there any other tips you would like to share with other founders?
Hmm. That was like the main one that but I don't know. I guess just like being okay with ambiguity, being okay with, things might take longer than you expect, and that's okay. I've started doing as well, like, especially if you're in early stages or you're bootstrapped, and you don't have a huge team to give other tasks to, and you're wearing a million hats, sometimes your humongous to-do list feels overwhelming. And sometimes when we get overwhelmed, it can also cause us to get into like a freeze state and not do much, right? Like, not potentially. So, what I've started doing is I started every day making a list of just three things, like three top priority things that have to get done that day that are going to move the needle for the business. And then if anything else, like, no matter what happens in your day, if you get sidetracked, pulled into new calls and things take longer, or you accomplish a bunch of other things, as long as those three things that you set out for that day are done, I find it helps me feel like a better sense of accomplishment. It feels like I have more control over all of these things that I have to get done. Um, Motivated. And also it helps you focus and not get caught up in the overwhelm of looking at the big picture of all the things to come. So I found that to be very
That's a great
helpful.
tip. So prioritization and focus.
Exactly. There's some research that says that, multitasking is not a real thing. Like, you can't actually, you're better off focusing on one task, finishing the task, and then moving on to the next. So
There is a cannabis for that, but for for
there is actually.
multitasking.
Yeah, multitasking. Yeah, exactly. Superpowers.
Yeah, I know I
Cannabis.
cannot multitask. So,
Yeah, me neither.
well, that's great. Is there any other thing you would like to mention to everyone? Or actually, let me ask you this question. We can share, your contact information. Where can people reach out to you? But if they do reach out to you, what would you like to ask them for?
Yeah, I mean, sign up for Elon Med and go check it out if you're looking for a natural way to manage your wellness or manage your health. It's a great resource. And we'd also love to hear your feedback. Like, that's how we improve the platform. So we love to hear the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. So yeah, please reach out. Or if there's anything you'd like to see on it, any questions that we could be answering better, we would love to hear it. So, yeah, it's free. It's free for clinicians and patients, everybody. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Corina. This was really wonderful, and I wish you, all the best with the future. I'm sure that it will be a great future for you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was nice to see you
My
again.
pleasure. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today on another episode of Beyond Product. My name is Moshe, and we are at Root Quotient, bringing you founders that are changing the world with technology. So stay tuned for more in the future. Take care. Bye bye.